Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from November 4th, 2022, and I'm recording this on May 4th, 2023. As always, I give you those dates so that you know when this information is actually relevant because the market is always moving and changing. As always, also, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. These are the two lists we've been using now for over 4 years to kind of look back, see what was hot in the moment, see how they performed in the 6 months since, so that we all make a little better decisions about what books we chase in the moment, what books we're patient on. So this week we got 18 books to talk about. So let's dig into this list and see what we can learn about the hot comics from 6 months ago and how they performed since. First up, we have Geiger, number 2, the Gary Frank second print, 1 in 25. So this is an indie comic with a 1 in 25 on a second print. This book was very interesting. It was going for, the previous sales were like in August for like $25, and then all of a sudden, there was a couple of raw sales for $250 plus. So this book suddenly became a $250 plus book after we got news about Geiger being optioned. This was kind of a rare cover. So this book that nobody was really buying suddenly became a $250 book. Well, now there are no recent sales. People are still asking $225 plus for this thing, but there have been no sales in the last 3 months. So yeah, this is down, and I would call this a trap. I think you're going to have come down quite a bit to get somebody to buy this at this point. Clearly, this overspiked, and all the sellers are still going off those most recent sales, which now are not recent at all because nobody's willing to pay that for this book. You could argue maybe I shouldn't say trap, I should say like I'll be back or whatever, but I don't see any evidence that this would sell even at 200 or 175. That yeah, we're definitely into the trap range on this one. Next, we have Wizard number 1 from 1991, the San Diego Comic-Con variant of the original issue of Wizard. Back then, a 9.8, we were getting some all-time highs out there. A 9.8 went for $7,500. 9.6 went for $2,100. 9.0 went for $700. Yeah, and I figured this would probably be a book that might be worth it just because the nostalgia and the fact that there are probably not that many graded copies of this. That people would, continue to pay a pretty penny for it. That has not happened. I mean, they're still paying a lot, but most recent 9.8 was only $3,500. We're talking less than half. Raw copies on this are $100 to $800 depending on condition. A 9.2 went for $350, which is half of that 9.0 6 months ago. So yeah, this actually turned into a dumpster fire. It actually dropped back more than 50%. I had several different grades. This book is definitely, I don't know what caused it to spike so hard last fall, but it has definitely dropped back and has not been able to sustain those prices, even for an older magazine that has a lot of nostalgia feels for a lot of people. Next, we have, we're moving into covers just on regular comics, and we got Gargoyles number 1, the Diamond Retailer Summit Ashcan variant. And this was going for $75 to $100 right after it was given away. And I got no sales on this. I only found one listing. It was listed at $175, but that was a signed copy. So not sure what to say about this. I call it steady because there's really no way to judge where this would go and what people would pay for it at the moment. It's kind of just become a ghost. I don't know how many of these are really out there, but it doesn't appear like there's only the one listed, and it is signed, so that obviously alters how much you would say it's actually worth, but it's also not selling at that price either. So this is one of those that if you can find it and find it for a reasonable deal and you're interested, I would probably jump on, but I'd be cautious about paying just too much, even though it's kind of a ghost. Next, we have The Mandalorian number 5, the EM Gist 1 in 50. This 1 in 50 was only going for $60 to $80 back then, so that usually doesn't mean very well. It usually ends up it's going to be a trap, going to be well below ratio. And it is and it isn't. Sales on this are a little bit all over the place. We have $15 to $75 sales. I'm sure some of those lower $15, $20 sales are because of condition, but there's a lot of sales, 30, 40, 25, 50, 75. This book is a little all over the place, and yeah, but overall I would call it a down, and I'll be back. 9.8 there was a recent 9.8 sale or actually two sales for $140, both of them. So it didn't turn into the trap, I don't think, but it definitely would be one I would look for a deal on and be patient on, for sure. Next, we have Deadpool #1, the Ken Lashley Notorious B.I.G. variant. This one surprises me a little bit. People jumped all over this. Famous musician, rapper on the cover was going for $70 back then, right out of the gate. And now it's a $70 to $145 book. I really didn't think this one would continue to grow, but it has. Interestingly enough, 9.8 start about where the raw copies end at 150 to 225. But yeah, this book has done really, really well over its first 6 months. I don't particularly think it's that great of a cover of him, but people apparently really want this one, and it's still going for big money. Next, we're going to move out of our cover, so we didn't have very many covers this week. We're going to move into Comic Buzz, and we have TMNT, The Last Ronin, #1, hitting the list for, I don't know, 10th or 15th time, probably it seems like, since this book originally came out. Popular story, but this was hitting the list this year because we got the solicitation for The Last Ronin, The Lost Years, which started back in January. I don't know how far we are into that series. We may have only gotten one issue at this point, given how long it took The Last Ronin to come out. But yeah, so that prompted everybody back into everybody's mind. Raw copies jumped back up to $80 back then. 9.8 jumped back up to $180. And now it's pretty much in these same ranges, 60 to 90 for a raw copy, 175 to 250 for 9.8. So 9.8 you could argue are a little up. Raw copies are maybe a little bit on the I'll be back side, but really pretty close. So we're overall going to call this steady and worth it, as it's really right in that same range. And if you bought it back then, you're probably doing okay, for sure. And this book has continued to be popular. People really enjoyed this story, I guess. I haven't read it yet, but people really seem to continue to be after this book and collecting this story arc. So next, we have Escape from Wyoming, #1, another bad idea book hitting the list, which is a bad idea to chase if you've been paying any attention. These bad idea books have hit the list frequently over the last few years, and almost none of them have done well. Really, the only one that's really, you could say it's really done well is the very first one. But this one jumped out. Another bad idea book jumped out, was going $25 to $30. Now, recently, there's only been 3 recent sales, a $5 sale, an $8 sale, and a $20 sale. This is a trap. Another down trap from a bad idea book. Really just the gimmick here that gets people to chase these books when they first come out because they're hard to find, but the stories haven't been sustaining them. I know a lot of people say that they enjoyed the read, but it hasn't been enough to keep the value, and the gimmicks from selling and people trying to buy these things when they first get them just aren't sustaining these books. It's just not happening. Next, so I would always be patient with a bad idea book. Next, our last Comic Buzz, and it's West Coast Avengers #7, the first appearance of Jeff the Land Shark. And this had to do with him getting a webcomic that's now been coming out for a little while, but it started coming out back then, which was causing this book to hit the list. Raw copies were going for $60 back then. Now it's a $30 to $80 book. 9.8, only one sale, but went for $280, which is a lot for Jeff the Land Shark, seems to me like, but I think this is a very popular character. I haven't really read anything where he's really appeared. He's kind of like a dog that's a shark, but people seem to love this character in this book, and this one's been steady and worth it because of it. So definitely a book that has continued to hold value and has stayed worth it if you jumped in on it even back then. You can get some deals, but overall, definitely worth it. Next, we're going to move into a little DC stuff. We have Green Lantern #87, the first appearance of Jon Stewart. This is on the list for the second week in a row because WB was saying they were going to shift the focus of the Green Lantern show to him. Back then, raw copies were 150 to 400. 9.2 went for 12. Now it's 125 to 600. 9.2, 1300. So another steady and worth it. Very popular character. A really great book. Always had value, and it's sustaining the value from the little bit of a bump it got with the Green Lantern show. We'll see if we ever get that show. I'm kind of dubious as long as they've been talking about it and as far out as we seem to still be from getting a Green Lantern show. Next, we have the Omega Men, number 3, first appearance of Lobo. And this is just people specking that when James Gunn was taking over, that Lobo's a character he would use. Kind of like we talked about Booster Gold last week. Same sort of thing. There's been rumors since about Lobo and Jason Momoa and all kinds of stuff. Back then, raw copies were averaging around 100, 9.8 up to 375. Now it's a $50 to $100 book for a raw copy, $340 to $360, so down just slightly on the 9.8 side. So we're all down and I'll be back, but just barely not a steady I'll be back on this one in terms of values. But yeah, definitely a book that, you wouldn't have lost a lot if you jumped in back at those prices, but definitely was worth being patient looking for a deal. All right, with that, we got a little Sony Spider stuff and then a whole bunch of MCU to wrap this list out. So our one Sony Spider-Man book was Spider-Man 2099, the first appearance of Venom 99. Really no idea why this was hitting the list back then. I think there were some rumors maybe we might get we knew we were getting 2099 for the Across the Spider-Verse stuff. Maybe people were just specking on that. Not sure what was going on here. But raw copies of this book jumped up to $40 to $50. Now it's a $20 to $45 book, with most of the sales being $20, $35-ish. So another down, and I'll be back. Again, not sure what was prompting it back then, but has not held. It's held pretty well, but really it's kind of just returned to where it's typically been. All right, with that, we're going to move all into MCU, although the first book is MCU? Question mark. First up, we have Micronauts number 1. The first appearance of the Micronauts. And this was all based on speculation that we would get some version in Ant-Man Quantumania, Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, even though Marvel didn't have the rights to the Micronauts. Paramount has the rights to them, but we did, I think, get sort of a version of these. I'm not very familiar with these characters, but not the actual characters. Back then, raw copies were going for $30, 9.8, $185. Now it's a $10 to $20 book. 9.8 still going for $150, so it's only kind of an I'll be back on the 9.8 side, but definitely a trap on the raw side, and definitely worth being patient on, as this really didn't pay off in any sort of real way in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Next, we have Avengers number 6. It was on the list for the second week in a row. The first appearance of Azari, the son of T'Challa and Storm, in an alternate version, I think. Anyway, people thinking that was going to be the kid from the trailers. It was not that version of T'Challa's son. Back then, raw copies were going for $15 to $30, 9.8 going for $250. Now it's a $5 to $8 book, so definitely a dumpster fire on this one. Yeah, and that's the first of multiple dumpster fires we're about to get. Next, we have Wonder Man number 1 from 1986, the first solo title for Wonder Man, which was just a one-shot. Back then, raw copies were going for $25. A newsstand 9.8 went for $600. This was all based on casting news for the Wonder Man show, and now it's a $4 to $10 book. 9.8, $2 to $300. Yeah, that's a dumpster fire. The book has come way back down. Even though we're still getting the show, just the buzz when we got initial casting has not carried that book at all. Next, we have Wonder Man number 1 from 1991, the first ongoing solo title for Wonder Man. 5 to 15 back then, so not nearly as high. 9.8, 90 to 110. Not crazy high for this book. It's now $1 to $10 book, with most of the sales being under 5, but 9.8 are 30 to 50. That's a dumpster fire on the 9.8 side for sure. The only reason it's probably not a dumpster fire on the raw side is just because they didn't have that far to go down. This book has definitely not carried any of that value from in the fall. Next, we have West Coast Avengers number 45. The first appearance of White Vision. It was hitting the list again because we got news that we were going to get a Vision show coming up eventually. It was on the horizon, confirmed. Caused raw copies for this book to jump back to $30 to $50. 9.8s were hitting $450. A reminder that during WandaVision, 9.8 of this were $1,200 to $1,500. Like, it was going for huge, crazy money. And this bump back got it back to $450 for a 9.8. And now it's a $200 to $250 book for a 9.8. $10 to $60 on the raw side. So you can say the same kind of range, but that's definitely a trap again on a 9.8, even from 6 months ago. This book was, this is one of those I felt very strongly about when people were chasing it during WandaVision. That was not a good choice. It has proved not to be. And yeah, this book is really, really cheap compared to then now. So if you do have interest in White Vision, now's a much better time to go after it than it was 6 months ago, or especially 2 years ago, for sure. Next, we have Young Avengers #1, the first appearance of Kate Bishop and some other characters as well. This is still based on the rumors that we're going to get a Young Avengers project at some point, that Marvel is building toward that. This is still, even back then, it was going for 180 for raw copies on average. 9.8 hit 500. That was still down from the heights previously prior to the Hawkeye show. Now raw copies though are 60 to 180, 9.8 350 to 400. So this is also turned into a trap. This book has been the epitome of a roller coaster since I've been doing this list for 4 years. It's been up, it's been down, it's been everywhere in between. Whenever there's news, it jumps up. Whenever there's not, it fades back down. That is currently what's happening with this book. And yeah, it continues to be a roller coaster. So buy the dips if you're interested in this book for sure. And then our last book this week is Avengers, the Children's Crusade, #1. And this was just rumored that this might be part of the plot line for a Young Avengers movie or show. So yeah, because it involves a lot of the Young Avengers. Anyway, raw copies back then were going for 20, and 9.8 hit 250. Now it's a $2 to $25 book, so there are still some sales that are up there, but most of the sales are under $10. 9.8 only going for 100, so another trap. And really, these storyline books, even if it comes to fruition that they use it, don't usually do very well. So that is this week's list. We did have one book that went up this week, but otherwise it's down, and it's with just a couple of steadies. So another week that it would have paid to be patient for sure. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.